Good afternoon, it's 3:30 p.m. and welcome to Animal Nation, a show about animal rights. Each week we will meet inspiring guests, passionate about making the world a fairer place, and for compassion's sake, my plea for a kinder world. And of course some great music. My name is Felicity Anderson and this is Animal Nation. With my husband Robin, I run Blackwood Fields, a farm animal sanctuary here in the southwest. I'm driven to make the world a kinder, fairer place for all beings. And I want to start a conversation with you about how we can make that happen. Make sure you join me over at the Animal Nation Facebook page and on Twitter at Nation Animal. Now let's get started. Coming up on the show, I will be joined by the indefatigable Jan Saunders. Jan is a 33-year veteran of the Victoria Police, with 27 of those years spent in the Mounted Division. She is now an animal rights activist, and when not attending actions, she spends her time running ultramarathons to raise funds for animal rights organisations. You're listening to OCR FM 98.3 Colac and District and 88.7 along the coast, and this is Animal Nation. But here's some Dolly Parton first, with Put a Little Love in Your Heart. Welcome back to Animal Nation. Now I'm about to introduce you to Jan Saunders. I'm so excited to have her as Animal Nation's first guest. To me, Jan encapsulates all that the animal rights movement needs in an activist. She is warm and engaging, intelligent and articulate, and above all else has belief in the possibility of change. And I must say, having her lovely smiling face looking across me at the desk is doing something to calm my nerves. A 33-year veteran of Victoria Police turned vegan activist, Jan is also an endurance athlete. She has summited some of the world's highest peaks and run thousands of kilometres through mountainous terrain across the globe. She joins me now to talk about her passion for being the kindest and strongest version of herself. Welcome to Animal Nation, Jan.
Thank you so much, Felicity.
It's wonderful to have you.
It's wonderful to be here, and it's a real pleasure to be your very first guest.
Well, thank you. And thank you to Mac, I should say. Mac, Jan's beautiful dog, is also here, and he's enjoying a lovely head rub at the moment.
Trusty sidekick, goes wherever I go.
Yes. Now, there's so much we could talk about, but I wanted to start off with maybe if you could tell us a little bit about the transition from being a career cop to being a vegan activist.
Sure. I mean, it is a bit of a leap for some people, but I do know that there are quite a lot of vegans and, people that believe in animal rights in the police force, in all walks of life, of course. But with my particular journey, I joined the police force when I was 20. I left a couple of years ago. I was in the mounted branch for most of my career as a trainer and riding instructor, and actually did train and teach riding outside of work as well. So It was a huge part of my life. I guess I was a quintessential animal lover that didn't really see that cognitive dissonance between the animals that I felt were worthy of protection and the ones I really didn't consider at all, other than what I selected from the supermarket or the butcher and put on my plate every day. The turning point came for me with an expose by Animals Australia that was aired, I think, in 2011, which on Four Corners, A Bloody Business, which was about live export to Indonesia. And I know from talking to many people that was a big eye-opener for them.
It definitely was, I think. You speak to so many people who, for them, that was a turning point for them.
It's sort of like it woke us up, I think, what was happening. And of course, you tend to compartmentalise and so that's overseas, and so I was quite outraged and I got online and did my little petitions and the like. But delving into the Animals Australia website, I started to look beyond that and started to learn about the dairy industry, about the egg industry, about all forms of the way we use animals and see it as normal, natural, necessary. And I actually remember being a little bit peeved at one stage because there just seemed to be one thing after another. I said, oh, come on. It's like ridiculous now that I think about it. But I was almost like, oh, but I'm already doing this. Like, do I have to look at all this as well? And I did. And then you sort of wound it back, and it did take me me a while still to join the dots, probably a good year, until I really started to examine my choices.
Yeah.
It's not just about what goes on overseas. What about my choices that I was making every day?
And that's the hardest for most
holding that
people,
mirror
isn't
up.
it? Just
Yeah.
having to accept in yourself
Absolutely.
that your choices have caused harm.
Yeah, so, I did start to, I actually remember going to a wedding, and my then, quite recently ex-boyfriend at that time, he was a beef cattle farmer. And, he'd send me photos of the new calves, and I go, are they going to market? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, but still not really joining those dots. He's still a great friend of mine and has actually made a lot of changes in his own diet, but he's in one of those situations that I think a lot of farming families are in, that it's a family business, and that's all they know. And sometimes that younger generation coming through actually aren't so comfortable with it. No. Plus, my ex, he tells me, market prices, he said, I don't know why anyone would get into this business now. And it's
the
really
responsibility of the legacy often, isn't it?
Exactly, and inherited debt. It's a very real factor. I mean, I could talk about this endlessly, and I won't, because I know we've got 15 minutes. But, it's a very... I know with some activists it all appears quite black and white. If we won't eat our dogs, why are we eating pigs? And that's a very valid point. But when we're talking about an embedded infrastructure and way of being for... hundreds and hundreds of years. We can't just... it's really only been in Australia as an awareness thing for the last 10. And, there's still a lot of pushback, and I think there's more to come, because, obviously this is just the beginning, and it's not something that's going to go away, and we're seeing that globally.
Yeah, no, things are definitely changing.
Yeah, I did get off the subject about my transition from... See, this is what happens with me. Apologies.
That's all right, Jan.
So that awareness, I went vegan in 2012. At that time, I was actually off work with a back injury, a workplace back injury, and it's often those sort of personally challenging times that makes us go a little inward and look deeper within ourselves, because our sense of self and identity is challenged. And part of that was actually that deepening awareness of how we use animals as a society, and me personally. Long story short, I actually took off overseas. It was unplanned travel, threw on my backpack and took off for a year. The plan was no plan. And during that time, I sort of had that realisation that a lot of what I did within Victoria Police was not something that, while we're just doing our job, a lot of the duties that I was asked to do and laws that I was asked to uphold, and individuals and corporations I was asked to protect, personally, it didn't really sit well with me. But you block that out when you're doing a job. As any slaughterhouse worker, as many farmers will tell you, you compartmentalise and you put yourself aside. But when I got back, my psyche had something else in mind for me. So I lasted about 3 weeks back in the job. I was at firearms training, and we were doing semi-automatic pistol training at that time, and I just couldn't do it. I could not do it, and that was it for me. So I knew that where my future lies was doing something far more positive for not just my immediate community, but the global community, because now we know about the impacts of animal agriculture on the environment, on people's health, and of course the animals themselves. And I ended up opening a vegan B&B, as you do when you've been a cop for 33 years.
It's it's a dramatic change. I love stories like yours, though, Jan, because I think it just shows that you can have those major changes in your life, and you can go on and be happier and more positive than you ever imagined.
I mean, it was scary. I'm not saying it was hugely scary. I had bills. I had property, mortgage. It was a scary jump. It was a difficult time, but oh my goodness, it's the best thing that I ever could imagine. And it's not just all about running around the world for me. It's like, I work, I do the B&B and cooking classes, and it's beautiful, positive, empowering experience. Yeah.
So you're an activist with a job.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm not one of those, get a job.
I know you said that you just had that moment when you just had to, that was it, it was like a line in the sand drawn. Yeah. Do you think, though, that the underlying values that made you want to be a police officer are similar to those that now have led you to veganism?
Absolutely. You know, when we join the police force, it's to serve and protect.
Yeah.
And that's a question that kept recurring to me as I reflected on a lot of the things that I was doing, both personally, so with, you know, the animals I was choosing to eat and wear, and some of the things I was doing at work. I was doing my job, but some of these serve and protect, you know, it was questionable. And who was I protecting and what from? I think anyone would agree that there's a lot of legislation there that is really unjust. You know, it is. It's really unjust, you know, and the people and corporations we're protecting is actually causing massive harm, you know, again, not just locally but globally. It's a very complex issue, obviously, and again, you could go into, you know, there's many, many layers to this. But I joined the police force because I wanted to help my community. Now I actually feel like I'm doing far more for not just the community but the global community in what I put out into the world. And it's that sort of collective energy that each and every person that sort of takes on a sort of moral action, I suppose, that, you know, collectively we do make change, you know, and it is threatening to some people. I understand that, and we need to look at those people also with understanding and compassion, because
that's right.
10 years ago we would have been exactly the same. Like, what the hell are you talking about? This is the way we've always done it. This is the way it has to be. You know, harden up, princess.
I think, we definitely need to understand why people feel threatened and why they feel defensive.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to look at any online conversation about veganism and it gets into pretty nasty territory.
It really
from both
does.
sides.
Both sides, yeah.
And I think if as vegans we're going to preach compassion and understanding for other species, then we have to give that, you know, show that to human beings as well.
Absolutely.
And start a conversation.
Yeah, because, you know, if we're talking about, you know, being dictated to and dogma and, you know, being forced to do certain things, you know, we can't then take that on ourselves and start doing it to other people. Because, like I said, you know, these things have been going on for so long. So, you know, we need a little bit of perspective and understanding here.
That's right.
Things can't change overnight.
No, and entrenched conditioning is what we're challenging. So.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Animal Nation on OCR FM, and we're talking to activist and endurance athlete Jan Saunders. Now, Jan, your passion for mountaineering and running has taken you to some of the world's most beautiful and remote places, from Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Now, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation of this.
Aconcagua
in Argentina, Central America, Nepal, New Zealand, and of course Outback Australia. You now use these adventures to fundraise, and since 2014 you've successfully raised $14,000 for various causes close to your heart. I wanted to ask you what you see as the benefits of this type of fundraising and why you've chosen that route.
Yeah, look, you know, when I turned 45, I started getting into endurance events, one of those positive midlife crises, perhaps. And, you know, I went vegan when I was 50. So I started to do adventure racing. I'd actually just climbed Kilimanjaro with some friends, and I realised that I wanted to do, you know, more of these types of things that you know, really took me out of my comfort zone and really challenged me, because, you know, it's only when you are really outside your comfort zone that you change, you grow and change, and always for the best. So with each hard thing that I've done, you know, it's something I take forward to the next hard thing. So adventure racing was massive. I've done 2 of the big World Series races of those. So they're multi-day races, paddling, mountain biking and running, navigation, map and compass in a team of 4, an hour and a half sleep a night for 9 days, if you sort of get my drift, on the go all the time. So it's, you know, it's not an easy sport, and it's an amazing sport. The last event I did was last year. I crossed the Pyrenees. I did 616 kilometres across the Pyrenees, and it was about 40,000 metres ascent. Again, probably on my feet 18 to 20 hours a day. Huge mountains over there, and raised on that occasion about $6,500 for 5 different animal rights organisations. I just sort of find, I mean, personally, I love it. I'm very, very connected with nature, and you know, I love the feeling that I get. I mean, there's nothing like, you know, I try always to sort of live in the now, and you really live in the now when you're in these places, and it's just the very basics that you have. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm a vegan, I'm carrying stuff on my back. You're in the French mountains, you know, there's cheese everywhere. It's nothing for me. So I just find there's nothing that sort of sends a stronger message to a non-vegan that about vegan, you know, a plant-powered diet being, you know, so healthy than paddling, running and cycling thousands of kilometres, you know.
Yeah, you're an amazing advertisement, I think, for plant-based health. And I don't. It
is a passion. Yeah, it's right up there with, you know, the sort of, you know, animals. It's the health side that I love to help people with as well.
Are your fellow competitors surprised that you do all that on a plant-based diet?
Actually, in endurance event, there's a lot of vegans. I'm not the only one out there because I think most people have heard about, you know, that sort of like that we want to lower our inflammation, and plant foods, like whole plant foods, not the vegan junk food that's proliferating, that will really help with inflammation. It's easy to digest, and that's why so many people that do endurance sports sort of choose a plant-based diet.
That's great to hear. The education, like information's out there, and people are educating themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. We're very lucky. It's a lucky time.
We're going to have to wrap it up, Jan, but I wanted to ask one last question. If you could say one thing to all the vegans out there, what would it be?
All the vegans or the non-vegans?
All the non-vegans, sorry. Yes, all the non-vegans.
For the non-vegans, I would just say, I would just ask if people could just set aside for maybe an hour perhaps their preconceived ideas, and just look with an open heart and open mind about, you know, what happens with animals, like once they leave the farm, and also have a look at some of those links, like, you know, forks over knives, eating you alive, what the health, cowspiracy for as far as environmentalism goes. And of course, earthlings, I'll put a warning on that one, earthlings is very graphic, the others aren't. But if you could put some time aside and look at those sort of documentaries, it'd be great.
Just having the courage to see.
Yeah, just with an open heart and open mind. You don't, you know, and the thing is, like, what I do with a lot of guests at my B&B, I just encourage them to lean in. You know, half my guests aren't even vegetarian, but they come for a cooking class to get some more plant foods in their diet. And I just encourage them to start crowding that plate out with the stuff that really heals.
That's great advocacy. And when people start feeling the benefits for themselves in their own bodies.
It's
and
powerful.
I think it just leads to that door being open.
It's a pretty amazing thing. I think I'm an advocate for that.
You definitely are. Well, thank you so much, Jan. It's been a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
And I appreciate you having the big drive down here. Unfortunately, though, we have to wrap it up. So coming up next is For Compassion's Sake, but we're going to have a song first. Here's Katy Perry with Raw. I want to say what a privilege it is to be given this platform to talk to you about this very important issue. And I want to thank you for listening. For me and many others, animal rights is one of the most pressing issues we face. Not only are we talking about the exploitation, suffering and killing of trillions of sentient beings each year, we are talking about environmental devastation, species extinction, human food security and poor health outcomes. The cornerstone, however, of the animal rights movement is simply respect for others. But what drives that need for us to be respectful? I believe it's compassion, an understanding that anyone who is conscious of their existence deserves to be treated kindly and not be harmed, to live their lives freely for their own purposes. Compassion compels us to choose what will benefit others, not our own selfish wants. And I believe our compassion is our greatest quality. It's what makes humans truly beautiful. Imagine for a moment a world devoid of compassion. What a barren and cruel landscape that would be. After all, it's compassion that drives us to lend a helping hand, and it's compassion that drives us to forgive. And yet you mention extending compassion to animals other than humans, and you're labelled silly and too emotional. Suddenly being compassionate is something to be made fun of. Currently, society accepts that other animals are not entitled to be treated with true kindness. We accept that certain individuals must suppress their empathy to ensure they can carry out tasks that most of us would turn away from. I can't accept that notion, and I never will. My compassion is not something to be compartmentalised, to be abandoned for the sake of fitting in, and I don't believe we should be asking that of anyone else. Our diminished compassion has diminished our humanity. While we only show kindness and respect to those who look like us and who use language like us, we are less than what we could be. This isn't a world I can accept, and I have faith when most people are truly honest, they feel the same. And so this brings me here to talk to you about how we can achieve this. I want you to engage, and I'll tell you now, I'm tired of pointless arguing. Other animals deserve better. They need better from us. So I'm asking you, if you disagree with me, fine, talk to me, but be polite. And if you can't, just listen with an open mind and understand I am not your enemy. Yes, I have a mission, I admit it. Trillions of sentient beings are dying in nets as our oceans are plundered. Billions are locked in sheds and on farms waiting to be trucked to their violent deaths. Millions are trapped in laboratories enduring horrific violations to their bodies and minds. And all over the world, the reproductivity of horses, dogs, cats, rabbits, turkeys, chickens, cows, pigs, sheep, ducks, geese, minks, foxes, rats, mice, and on is exploited for one greedy species, the human species, for our palate, for our amusement, and for our fashion. My mission is to free them from the horrors of their existence, to free them from our oppressive grasp. Animal Nation exists for this purpose, and I don't apologise for that. So I'm here to start a conversation with you, a conversation about them, about us, and about how we can do better. For compassion's sake, we must. That brings us to the end of today's Animal Nation. Thank you for joining me. I hope the show has given you some food for thought. I hope you can join me next week for Animal Nation. Until then, remember the words of Henry Beston. They are not brethren. They are not underlings. They are other nations.